The food you eat can activate or deactivate the functions of certain genes. So, by implication, it should be possible to turn off your fat genes, turn off your cancer genes, turn off your heart disease genes, and turn on your longevity genes. So, stop blaming your genes. Your genes are not your destiny. That's a series of seminars hosted by the College of Naturopathic Medicine in Cork and Dublin next week. And the woman sitting opposite me, Gosha Desmond, will explain how this is going to be done. Gosha is Research Director in Nutrition at the College of Naturopathic Medicine at Griffith College in Dublin. Gosha, good morning and welcome.
Good morning, everybody.
Let's start with a very common one. I'm a bit portly. It's not my fault. It's my genes. That's why I'm obese. True or false?
False. A lot of people think and have this false preconception. The very, very minority of cases of obesity can be actually linked to a genetic disorder. It is true that we have, some of us, probably about 60% of the European population have a gene called FTO gene that is responsible for susceptibility to obesity. But how can we explain the fact that in Ireland, for example, between 1998 and 2007, the percentage of obese people went up by 2.5 times. Our genes do not change that quickly. It's the lifestyle that changes quickly.
Let's talk about cancer. The same way there are people maybe who are susceptible to cancer of certain types running in families, for instance.
Now, it's partly true because cancer is a genetic disease in a sense. It starts from a mutation in our genes. But what we know now that most of the Western cancers, like colon cancer, breast cancer, prostate cancer, obviously lung cancer, are very much affected by environment. And the recent report by the World Cancer Research Fund 2007 said that up to 40% of all common cancers could be prevented by physical activity and diet alone, not including smoking. Now, that's a huge number yearly.
There's a kind of a study that used to be done but can no longer be done. And that is identical twins who are brought up in different environments. Nowadays, when twins are adopted, they are generally adopted together. But in the old days, one twin might go to one part of America, for example, and another twin to another, or in Dublin or whatever. And they have done some studies, haven't they, on identical twins?
Absolutely. The National Cancer Institute in the US and the American Institute of Cancer Research done a lot of studies on 10,000 identical twins. And the conclusion of those studies is that inherited genes play very little contribution to your actually overall cancer risk. It's the diet and the lifestyle and basically your environment that has the most effect.
So you have identical twins who may meet up after 50 years and find that they like the same colour, they like the same music. They have so many things in common that you wouldn't think are genetic, and yet they can have very different health risks associated with them depending on the environment in which they were brought up.
That's true. Like the conclusion of those studies that if you have an identical twin and your twin has, for example, bowel cancer, your risk of getting that bowel cancer just because of your genes is about 11%. So imagine all the rest is actually due to your own behaviors.
So 90% is environmental, if you like, and
it really varies from one cancer to cancer. We still don't know 100%, but we know that, for example, colon cancer, bowel cancer, is hugely influenced by diet and lifestyle. Up to 90% of that cancers could be just due to how we live and what we eat.
Is there a general dietary prescription that you can give us? The way to eat, things that are known to maybe be more risky to eat than other things?
I'm going to quote the World Cancer Research Report. It's very hard to give one recipe for everybody, but generally we know that the diet that was enjoyed by our early ancestors, so not 500,000 years ago, earlier than that, so the diet that we ate for the most of time of our evolution was mostly plant-based. So much more fruits and vegetables than today, much less saturated fat, much less meats than today. So what the World Cancer Report is saying, that our diet should be revolving around whole plant-based foods with less emphasis of energy-dense foods, and especially processed meats and red meat in terms of bowel cancer is something that came up 2 years ago.
One of the arguments that they say is that we're all living longer. So our diets have changed, but 21st century man and woman will live a hell of a lot longer than the people on these more primitive diets, if you like. So you've got to die of something. So eventually you're going to get a cancer. Or eventually you're going to have heart disease.
That's not the experience that we learn from the longest lived and the healthiest populations in the world. For example, like the Okinawans in Japan. This is an island, and there was studies done, long studies on those people, and they lived the longest of all the people on Earth, the longest life expectancy. They have the highest concentration of healthy centenarians, which is very important. This is what you were saying, Pat. We all think that when we get old, we have to get heart disease, hypertension, or cancer. We have to die of something. Now, those people out there, they actually don't get almost no cancers. Their arteries are as clean. On autopsy, the scientists opened up their arteries. They were as clean as the 5-year-old arteries in the Western populations. They didn't experience any hypertension. So obviously they died, but of natural causes. So their life quality when they were older was absolutely fantastic. So that's what we're trying to do. We're not trying to live 150 years old, but to improve our life quality when we're actually getting older.
So how much of what's in our genes, what percentage would you say contributes to our long life or our short life?
The scientists say that 30% is due to our genetic heritage, but 70% is due to our lifestyle. It's a huge amount of what we can do, and we, with College of Naturopathic Medicine, through those public health seminars we are running, at the moment we're running them in Cork and in Dublin, but also in 3 UK cities, what we're trying to say to the public is that they can take the responsibility of their own health, and we're actually teaching them that their lifestyle changes don't have to be that difficult, and they can be actually easy, but the public has to have some information, and we're trying to provide that information. Now we know that what we eat can actually have, apart from providing all the nutrients for it, it can have a direct effect on activating and deactivating certain genes. So as you said, we all have some genes that make us susceptible to certain diseases. But it's how we live and what we eat that makes those genes express. So
they call this diet that we should eat the Garden of Eden diet.
That's the term that was coined by the scientists from America, especially the scientists from Toronto. Professor Jenkins, who was actually the founder of the glycemic index concept in the 80s. Now, he was using this diet, which is the diet enjoyed by our ancestors.
Yeah.
So mostly plant-based, and he was actually able to reduce people's cholesterol in literally 3 weeks. By 30%, which was comparable to the modern first-generation statins. Dr. Ornish did the same thing with severe atherosclerosis. He put those people on this plant-based Garden of Eden diet, and now his program is run in hospitals in 5 states in the US as an alternative to coronary bypass operation because it's so effective.
We've been talking about heart disease and cancer. What about diabetes? Because there's an epidemic of type 2 diabetes throughout the Western world.
Now, that's pretty much the same story here. The scientists have concluded now that all those diseases, obesity, diabetes and heart disease, obesity is not our fault. It's actually a normal reaction of our genotype to an abnormal, they call it toxic environment we're living in. So our genes are not used to this kind of energy-rich, fat-rich diet that we are basically eating every single day, and that's why how we react, and that's why we had from 1970s 100% rise of diabetes rates, and now even children are getting diabetes.
You've lived in Ireland for how long?
8 years.
8 years, all right, and you are Polish by... how similar are we to your countrymen and women in Poland in terms of our diets and our bad habits?
You're a little bit ahead of us in terms of bad habits, but Poland is catching up, definitely.
And is that to do with affluence? As
Absolutely.
Poland becomes more affluent?
We are getting richer, and you see much more obese or fat children now. When I was going to school in the 1980s, there was almost no fat children in schools. Now you can see them every third or every fourth child is overweight.
Yeah. And if here, meat and potatoes are the staple diet, well, I mean, I always think of Poland, maybe that cabbage and stuff like that would be a central part of... Very
much meat, potatoes and cabbage. But these days, apart from the meat, potatoes and cabbage, we also eat meat 3 times a day as opposed to maybe once, twice, 3 times a week, depending. Like in the 80s, meat was rationed.
Yeah.
Also, we're having all the vending machines in the schools, so Snickers and Mars bars and the soft drinks. So all of that is coming into play. And, well, I used to enjoy once a week as a child. Now my children have every day. So that's what is causing it.
And it's storing up the health problems for the future.
Absolutely.